Hello and welcome to another episode of The Exchange.
On today's show, we will be discussing the self-esteem syndrome, particularly what is the best way to develop this in your child.
Are parents wrapping their kids in cotton wool and therefore hamstringing their ability to cope with the real world?
A healthy self-esteem is a child's best defence for the challenges of the world. A child with healthy self-esteem knows their strengths and weaknesses. They feel good about themselves and tend to have an easier time handling conflicts and resisting negative pressures. A child with low self-esteem sees obstacles to be a source of anxiety and frustration. They have a hard time solving problems and think, I can't, instead of, I can. So what's the best way to build up healthy self-esteem in a child and prepare them for the real world?
To discuss this topic, we're joined by parenting educator Michael Grose. Michael has a background in education but is known for his popular parenting columns in papers and magazines across Australia. And he's also the author of 8 books on parents. Welcome, Michael.
Yeah, thanks very much. Lovely to be here.
We're also joined by clinical psychologist Dr. Andrew Fuller. Andrew works with many schools and communities in Australia and internationally, specialising in the well-being of young people and their families. Great to have you with us, Andrew.
Great to be here.
Michael, tell us how critical is this whole aspect of self-esteem to a child's development?
Look, self-esteem is really important, as it was shown in the promo, but it's not the be-all and end-all. So I think in the 1990s sort of went down a sort of a self-esteem track, as though if we can sort of fix this sucker, so to speak, we'll develop kids who are healthy and who will reach their full potential. And self-esteem is just part of the story. So I guess it's one sort of link in the puzzle. And I think in some ways we're not too sure how we should promote it and how we need to develop it. So it's a really good topic to explore.
One of the things I'd be interested to know is, Andrew, the lack of self-esteem in a child looks like what in an adult?
Well, it looks like a reluctance to do things, to take on things that are risky. So it means I don't dance. It means I don't go places I don't know how it's going to turn out. And so what it basically means is a very narrow life, which is impoverished in terms of the adventures, which is a great shame, isn't it? Because, of course, when you narrow your life down just to the areas that are safe, you live a fairly, just a kind of pale kind of existence.
Yeah. So self-esteem then, from what you're saying, is vitally important. What are some of the causes of low self-esteem?
Well, I think it's important to know that it's okay to make mistakes. Firstly, we all stuff things up regularly. And the idea that somehow this is an idea that you just can't do that becomes then perfectionism. And perfectionism is just an ogre in terms of your life. You're then kind of narrowing your life down. And
everybody else is around you.
Well, that's right. You want to control them as well.
Yep.
When we think about self-esteem, there are sort of 2 types of self-esteem. There's global self-esteem, which is sort of how good you feel about yourself, and that's pretty important. That protects us against depression and helps us to wake up in the morning and get on with the business of the day. And then there's specific self-esteem, which we probably call self-efficacy, and that's how good you are at particular things, or how you think you are. So it's how good you think you are at riding a bike, or doing an English test, and we used to think that basically the global self-esteem, if you pick that up, would actually increase the specific self-esteems. But in fact, it's the reverse that's true. So with kids, if we can find even just one area of ability and competence and really help them to develop that, then they get a ricochet effect into that global sense of well-being.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Now, Michael, you're sitting there nodding and smiling.
Yeah, that snowball effect.
Sometimes
as parents, we can just be overcome. We don't know where do you start. And I guess we've all seen sometimes where the kids will pick up, particularly in an area where they may be okay at. They're doing well at sport and they start to blossom in sport, and then that will sort of transfer into other areas of their schooling. They'll start to blossom in other areas. So sometimes with kids who struggle, we don't know where to start. So it's sometimes a good idea to start at a strength, or start where you can have some success with kids and sort of build those little scaffolds along. I think another thing that's important, that sometimes self-esteem is born out of duress and hardship. Sometimes we sort of smooth the way for kids, and it's not always the way to sort of build kids up or build their self-confidence.
So talking about that, the hardship and the duress, the hurdles that kids face sometimes, how do we help them to actually build resilience? Because I think there's a lot of, the word resilience is out there a lot.
It certainly is, and Andrew's an expert in resilience, and we talk about resilience a lot. Resilience in some ways is coping, and I see what we're talking about is a little bit different. I see it more around character, and that notion of character as strengths. There's been a reasonable amount of work done in the US around that notion of how do we build character strengths in kids, which is, it's a little bit different than resilience, and it's that notion of how do we build conscientiousness, how do we build perseverance, how do we build self-discipline, self-initiative, etc. Because if cognitive skills were enough, that's all we need to do with kids. But cognitive skills aren't enough. We need to build other aspects around them. So that aspect of character is forged under resilience. And it's funny, when kids start to do well in certain areas, then I guess that self-esteem tends to take off as well. So it's not just a feeling, it's also a set of behaviours as well which go with it.
What are the warning signs of low self-esteem, Andrew?
I think it's when a child, I mean, all of us from time to time are reluctant to try things out and catastrophize when things might go wrong in advance. But when
So
that
you
becomes...
say catastrophize.
Yeah.
Just to put that out there, what does that mean? What does that look like? Give me a scenario.
Oh, that's having a hissy fit, really. That's freaking out.
It's just when everything's dreadful because one thing's gone wrong.
That's right. I'm not going to go to that school camp because everyone will hate me, or I'm not going to go to school today because I'm going to fail that test. That's that trying to avoid. And of course, we know that if you avoid stuff, it just comes back as a larger monster really later on in your life. And so it's just not good. I mean, we want to really have people broadening out the areas of their life and having a go. And so in my parenting workshops, I often ask parents to think about how they help their child to learn to walk. And so it's highly unlikely. They said, no, just sit there. Don't get up and walk because that's too risky. But they didn't either leave all of the sharp objects on the way. They kind of smoothed the path a bit.
Yes.
But still allowed kids to kind of experiment and try. And that's really, I think, the best model for building resilience is helping young people, helping us all, to try out new things, to go beyond our comfort zone and try out new things in our life, because that then builds people up, So often people try something out that they thought was going to be horrendous and they go, oh, it wasn't that hard.
Yeah.
Manage that.
Yeah. And it's that attitude to risk. We all want our kids to, I guess, reach full potential. People say, I want my child to succeed. In some ways, that's code for we want them to reach whatever their potential is. And kids who have sort of low self-esteem tend to be low risk takers. They'll do the things that they know they can succeed at, but they won't have a go at the things where are a bit risky. So their self-esteem is very much dependent on what they can do. So those kids who have real, I think, healthy self-esteem are able to separate themselves from their activity. So I had a go at that, it failed. And that's a little bit around how they explain the world to themselves as well, which they can pick up from the adults around them. So it's interesting, that the notion of, how do we build it? Kids have got to, it's about competence. Kids have got to actually do things. It's not about patting them on the head. So the more you can do things, the better you feel about yourself, and the more you build up. Yeah, I did it before, and so I'll be able to do it again. So that's important. But I also need, I guess, adults in their lives who can, in some ways, sort of smooth the way, but also be the cheerleader as well. So, every kid needs someone who says, I think you can do this.
And be realistic with them. Just do
yeah.
your best. It doesn't matter if you don't come the top of the class. Do your best.
And feedback's not such a bad thing sometimes as well. So sometimes we forget to give kids the feedback which they often do need to improve, for fear sometimes that will put them off. And again, some kids, I see it's like coaching a sporting team, that they are different. You've got to sort of nuance your message for different players, and similarly to kids. So you've got to nuance your message. And your kids are going through a hard time at school, or they're moving into adolescence, and they're sort of the roller coaster. You may have to sort of choose your time when you give the feedback, and choose the way you can do it. Whereas some kids can accept feedback quite easily. So,
talking about feedback, Andrew, how would you say that we can unknowingly take away self-esteem from a child?
Often by focusing on the outcome, really. And so often, okay, it's great to acknowledge you did well in that test, or you performed really well at that game. But I think it's more important to analyse the process of getting there.
Right.
So it's okay to say that's great, well done, you're a legend, but at the same time, how did you manage to do that? So whether you win, whether you lose, whether you succeeded or failed, basically it's important to analyse that process. In my research group, Resilient Youth Australia, find that one of the peak danger points for children is grade 3 and grade 4. So lots of kids start off with an eagerness to learn, they're excited about school, but by about grade 3, grade 4, which is not coincidentally when we start ranking kids in terms of NAPLAN, lots of them basically lose their momentum and go, this is just not for me, and they dumb themselves down, won't have a go, and lose their confidence. And it's a great, great shame.
Okay, we're going to take a break right now, and we'll be back with Street Talk and more right after this.
What do you think is the best way to raise a child to have a healthy self-esteem?
To expressing your own confidence and just being, having your own healthy self-esteem and expressing that, I think.
I think having a healthy self-esteem yourself. So my mother was really good at just getting us out and being active and eating healthy, but never made it an issue. There was always fruit salad in the fridge, and there was the option to watch TV if you wanted, but they were all going to go out for a bike ride, so we went and did that. So if you're feeling healthy about who you are, then I think the kids pick up on that.
I guess just let them be themselves and encourage and support them with whatever they wish to do.
I think from their earliest time you give them a sense of empowerment, that you make them feel like they're responsible for their own actions, that you don't mollycoddle.
I think you live your life as an example every day for them so that they observe it more than your words.
I think making sure you provide them with a lot of love and guidance and also expose them to elements to where they may be at risk of failing, so they can learn that it's not all about winning all the time.
Smother them with love and always promote happiness and be a good role model and confident in yourself.
I think the most important thing is don't tell them they're good at things they're actually crap at. Tell them the truth.
I think it's practice what you preach. Yeah. So it can't be that you say one thing and do the other.
Do you think it's important that a child learns how to win and lose gracefully?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if you don't learn how to lose, then you're not always going to win. So, yeah, I think that's very important.
Yes, absolutely. Because if they don't learn how to lose, they're going to not know how to handle disappointment.
Yes, absolutely. I'm a really big athlete, so I think it's really important. The participation ribbons are fine, but that's not teaching them about life, so yeah.
Oh, no doubt. In life, you don't win all the time. Even the most successful people in the world have setbacks, and a lot of those people have said they learn more from their setbacks from their victories.
Kids need to learn how to lose and to be okay with it, because in life you're never going to always win.
Yes, definitely. Because I think there's a greater lessons in losing, actually, and knowing that the effort was worthwhile.
I think children have to learn to lose. I think children who just win all the time turn into not very nice people.
As long as you take something out of losing, then in many ways it's not a loss.
Absolutely, yeah. Definitely. But mainly win. Yeah.
Mainly win.
Mainly win.
Welcome back. We're discussing the self-esteem syndrome with parenting expert Michael Grose and clinical psychologist Andrew Fuller. And Sandra, our Street Talk reporter, joins us. Welcome, Sandra.
Great to be here.
Some
great fun right there, didn't it?
Yeah, some really good responses there from people. Obviously, people like to win, but we should also learn how to lose.
Yes, but mainly win.
But mainly win.
Mainly win.
Totally, of course. I watched a Disney program years ago with my kids, and they said there are no losers, there are only winners and people who are not them.
Oh.
I thought it was very clever.
I actually think it's quite fascinating, that the response, because everyone said, oh, yes, we've got to teach kids both, win and lose. However, I've seen a lot of parents, and I've played a lot of board games with their children, where no one's allowed to win. And there can't be a clear winner because someone obviously loses.
Really?
So it's fascinating because I've experienced that, and I don't know if you see that in talking to parents and protecting their kids from losing.
Sometimes removing the competitive element in a game can make life easier at home, particularly when the kids will fight, etc.
Yeah.
So there's a valid sort of, I want some harmony, so we won't introduce the competitive element. But look,
takes all the fun out of it, though.
It does, and that's part of it. It's interesting, the notion of lose of it. In our society at the moment, there's losing has there's a whole lot of emotion wrapped around that. So I think losing now means a lot more than it did perhaps when I was growing up. It was, winners or losers. And so we've got to be careful how we place that. It was interesting just watching some of the comments there of sometimes we as parents will say, yeah, it's okay to lose, you can lose, but our behaviour says you need to win.
So we're going to see that word being wiped out of the dictionary because it's too...
What, the loser word?
Correct. Like it's going to become politically incorrect to use it.
I guess we all need to cope with it. We all need to deal with it. But losing also, there's a set of skills around that, which parents can teach their kids, that notion of how you lose well. Yeah. And I guess in some ways, we've learned it through games and through sport and how you do lose. It's also, I think it's a good opportunity parents may have at the moment to look at some of our sporting stars who don't lose so well and talk about that. So there's a social aspect around that and how we do get on and how we're perceived by others. There's also that notion of when you lose, what does it mean? Is losing about an opportunity to have another go?
Yes, is it the be-all and end-all?
Yeah. So there's that aspect of how you deal with it as well as a parent.
How can you do better the next time? Was there anything, Andrew, that struck you from the street talk?
Well, my family used to play Monopoly for so damn long that no one by the end of the game would care who won or lost it, really.
Glad it was over.
That's right. We're just sick to death of the game.
So strategic.
It was great training because you just go, I don't care. You got more money than I. Who gives a rat's? So it was a really useful kind of bit of training, I reckon. Because I think, in a way, one of the things you need to learn, of course, is to congratulate the winner. That's a very important thing. And to make sure that kids learn that from their parents is also very important. And then it's about, as I said earlier, a bit analysing the process and learning from the experience, whether you win or lose. So great sporting teams, for example, play the same way regardless of the score. And so really you're aimed to keep your performance at the level that you want it to be. So one of the things to think about is how you use your opponent as your best ally, because they help you to improve your own performance in whatever it might be. And so lots of people talk about, if they were in grade 5 and they were second at the test in spelling or something, how they really motivate them to try to get to that kind of next position up. And so they really often then get motivators to try and do better. And that's a useful way of dealing with failure, isn't it? Rather than getting the sulks and going, oh, well, I'll give this up.
There's a program, just building on what Andrew's talking about, there's a program, the Riverdale program in the United States, which has had a huge amount of success with kids who come from lower socioeconomic areas but do have the smarts to begin with, but used to give up. And basically they're using chess. And they use chess to teach them that when they don't do well, they've got to revisit that. Now, what didn't you do well? And they go through and look at the strategies they've used, and it's really important that they learn from that. So they take them through that whole process of, right, it was the 5th move on the 6th, that's where you made it wrong. Next time you can improve on that. So it's that notion of giving kids an opportunity to reflect on what they did, but also moving forward. So it's not about winning and losing, it's actually just how can you get better. And often those kids would be allowed to throw the tantrum, throw the hissy fit, never going to play again. So that's dealt with, and now, okay, you are going to play again. Now let's see how we can work through that.
And I loved what the girl said about the appreciation ribbons. She's not into the appreciation ribbons. And it is difficult because if someone has really applied themselves and really worked hard to see everyone get equal benefit, why would you bother? Why would you even try?
And I guess it demeans the whole trophy process. I mean, some kids do really try. Some kids are good club men and women and kids, and so they need to be picked out. But if everyone's getting that, then it demeans the whole sort of process.
It means nothing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Another thing I picked up was one parent on the street said, oh, it's important that the parents have good, healthy self-esteem and that will reflect in the kids. But I know parents who do, and one child has great self-esteem and they're parenting their children the same way, and then one other doesn't. So is that always a foolproof way in terms of parents having the healthy self-esteem in the first place?
Well, certainly modelling an adventurous lifestyle is beneficial, there's no doubt about that on behalf of parents, but most families are like a baseball game, really, and so when one kid's got one base covered, that's it. Then the others have got to kind of fit around that. And so if one's got a whole lot of, it's almost like if my sister's got great artistic skills, well, I can't really pursue an artistic career because she's got that base covered. And it's important as parents to kind of be aware that we need to think about how you sometimes share those bases.
They're niche marketers.
Within your family.
They'll go to their
So if you've
strengths.
got one singer, you can't have the Von Trapp family. That's what you aim for it, I guess. I mean, there is one place that we love to lose, and we actually win when we lose, and that is, of course, with weight.
Oh, yes.
Unless you're a bodybuilder.
Boom, boom. I like the lady who said, just before we go to a break, she said, don't tell them they're good at things they're crap at. I thought that was
Tell
absolutely
them the
spot on.
truth.
Totally. Sandra, thanks for popping in.
Great to be here.
And we'll be back with more in just a moment on The Exchange. Welcome back. We're chatting with Michael Grose and Andrew Fuller about building self-esteem in children. And Michael, you've written a book called Thrive. Talk about some of the things that parents can do based on your book to really instill confidence and self-esteem into their kids.
Yeah, I think one of the important things for parents to do is it's almost counterintuitive, but to make yourself redundant from the earliest possible age. So a lot of the notion about building confidence in kids is building real autonomy and real independence. So independence building is really about self-sufficiency. So developing from the earliest possible age the skills of self-sufficiency. So being able to, I've got 20 things that your child should be able to do by the time they're 10, and one of them is be able to cook a 3-course meal. Because kids can, and so
they definitely can.
Often when kids can, then we as parents need to let them do. So I guess that's one aspect of it, and that takes a lot of teaching, and that takes a lot of giving kids opportunity to do things, and second, spend some time teaching them and showing them how to do it, and not freaking out if they make mistakes, and recognising that there's what I call a kid's level of doing things and an adult level of doing things.
So it should be age appropriate.
Yeah, a 3-year-old can make a bed, but just not very well. But arrange the doonas and sort of build on up. So I think that's really important because that gives kids a real basis of I can do things. It helps them build a sort of sense of mastery, and then so we sort of move up from there as well. But I think that's perhaps one of the most important but very basic things that we as parents need to do is just develop that sense of real independence and self-sufficiency. And I worked with a mum recently who had a child who could play, a 7-year-old who could play a violin like a genius, but couldn't make a basic sandwich to save themselves. So we had things a little bit around.
Like that.
Yeah, she had things the wrong way round. So I think we need to build some of those basic skills, and then I guess let's look at your messaging as well. I'm a big believer in that we don't place limits on kids by praising them, but we actually point out what we call effort praise and point out the process of what kids do. So when they've done something, there was a great effort, or we look at their improvement or whatever it is, and actually what you're teaching kids is a strategy. That's actually a strategy to better, rather than sort of always putting the sort of hand on the head of the kids for the results of what they do. And the kids tell us too that the younger, the older they get, the more they want this sort of effort praise, or the encouragement as we call it. And that's a fine line. I think everyone, I remember when I made my first 50 as a 16-year-old at cricket, I've tried for years to get it, and I would have felt ripped off if I had to raced home to Dad and say, Dad, I made 50, and he said, well, son, glad you see you're trying. Mention the result, but it's all about where we place the emphasis.
Exactly.
I think that's important.
Yeah, what about you, Andrew? What do you think? Key
I
areas?
suppose from all of the years of therapy sessions that I've had with kids, my overall impression would be that people probably change from the outside in, which means basically if I can get somebody doing things that where they feel competent, or they feel generous, or they feel compassionate, then they define themselves as generous, compassionate, capable people. So it's more about what you do rather than what you say. And it's what they do is more important than what they say as well. So I see so many people who astonish themselves in terms of what they're truly capable of, regardless of what their own opinion about their own abilities are.
So Michael, you've written Thrive and a number of other books. Is Thrive the book you'd recommend?
Yeah, I'd definitely go for Thriving. It's the one about confidence building and self-esteem building.
Okay, and Andrew, which one of your books would you recommend?
Well, Tricky Teens seems to be pretty popular. There seem to be a few of those around, so Tricky Teens.
Tricky Teens, brilliant. Michael and Andrew, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
your time today, and thank you for watching. Please go to our website for a fact sheet as well as more information about our show. Hope you can join us next time.
Bye for now.